So we're talking about knife crime. We often do in London, and we're talking about what should happen to those caught carrying knives on the streets of London. And the story is that 80% of those caught carrying knives are not sent to jail. This is despite David Cameron pledging to send all knife yobs to jail. That isn't what's happening. And I wonder whether you agree with Barry Mizzen that the answer is education, and if so, what kind of educational programme should be implemented? Let's go on the line to Dr. William Henry. Hello there.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. I mean, did you hear Barry Mizzen there saying you can't just keep locking young people up? It's not going to work.
I didn't hear, and to be honest, until your person just called me, I wasn't even aware of it because I kind of avoid the news sometimes.
Oh, right, okay.
I've just had a quick look at it on the online, on the Mirror online, yeah.
I mean, you're a former lecturer at Goldsmiths College. This is your specialist area. I was asking Barry Mizzen, what kind of educational programme would be dramatic enough and all-encompassing enough to change behavioural patterns so that kids who thought they should carry knives wouldn't carry them? I mean, what would it be that you were teaching them? It's not as if they don't know that knives can cause harm. They do know.
Well, the thing is, sometimes we have to put the things in context. And, I was born in the UK in the 50s, and I know that people have always walked around with knives, sometimes for posturing and fashion, sometimes for protection. One of the things that we've been pointing out, myself and a lot of the other educational interventionists who, work in schools and pupil referral units, etc., we've been running these programs for over a decade now, trying to raise the awareness of a lot of young people, because the biggest problem that we find is a lot of young people go around armed because they're trying to stave off a threat that isn't really there. Oftentimes the threat is magnified in the media, and a lot of the programs that we run, and especially, I'm not going to get into no politicking, but the truth is, since this government has been elected, people like myself, independent consultants, we've just been cut. So the work we were doing in schools and pupil referral units with those who were more likely to be involved in these kinds of crimes and offences has been cut. Mm-hmm. A lot of the times the interventions that we can do are piecemeal. So just when we start to actually explain to these young people, because it's not just about not carrying knives, it's about changing their whole perspective. Many of them, their lifestyles are media-driven. So, for instance, I know recently there was a TV program called Top Boys.
Yes, and again, starring Ashley Waters about gangs, I know. Yes.
Well, yeah, and to be honest, I didn't watch it because I knew what it was going to be. People fed back to me. But what I'm basically saying is, if this is what our young people are constantly fed, a diet of that... But
they're not constantly fed it, are they? You're mentioning it as one particular programme. They're not constantly fed a diet of programmes starring Ashley Waters about gangs in London. It's the one programme, isn't it?
Just a second. You tell me where are the alternatives. When we see our young people represented in the mainstream media, you tell me where the positive alternatives are.
X Factor?
X Factor.
John Craven's News Round? I don't know. I mean, Downton Abbey?
Well,
I don't know. There's not only one kind of media, is there?
This is what I'm saying to you. Most of what comes out of the mainstream media that is directed towards our young people is either nihilistic or self-destructive. That's what it is. So what I'm saying is, where is the stuff to create the balance?
Well, I'm asking you and I was also asking Barry Mizzen, and I wasn't really getting an answer, and I'm only trying to, achieve some kind of level of enlightenment here, so that we know what we're talking about.
But they'll never.
Let me ask you this: when you have a kid who carries a knife, and you want to say to this kid, "Don't do it," because if you do it, you might end up being killed or killing somebody. It's a really bad idea. I know you think it's for your own protection, but if you carry it, it's much more likely that you're going to end up with your head sliced off. So don't do it. Mm-hmm. How do you change? As you said you need an absolutely seismic shift in this that teenager's perception of their place in the world and their destiny and what they're meant to be doing and who they are and what their role models are and everything else. How can you even set about changing a mindset like that? And what do you say? What do you do?
We do, and we've done it successfully for years.
Well, how?
Because what we do is we do programs where we explain to the young people and we get them to locate themselves within this society, because oftentimes they don't. And as I said, if what they're fed, a constant diet, is that, one, they're all disaffected, they have low aspirations, supposedly have low self-esteem, what alternatives are there for them other than to go out and do this crazy stuff that they do see constantly portrayed in the media? So what we have to do is we try to get them to think about education. We try to get them to think about their local communities and their involvement in the local communities. But if those spaces that you can actually do those programs where you can affect that kind of change in their consciousness are constantly being closed or cut, then we will end up with this situation.
Do you agree? Do you agree with Barry Mizzen that it's about education rather than locking up young people? Because lots of people listening will just think, look, all they need is a mandatory jail sentence. They need to know it's 5 years behind bars, and when they know that, that's all you need to tell them. You need to say, don't carry a knife, because if you do, you'll be locked up for 5 years. Is that what you want?
Can I just explain something?
Yes.
Okay, so we lock them up for 5 years. When they're in prison, what kind of programs do they get to rehabilitate them?
You tell me.
No, you
nothing.
tell me.
Well, nothing much. Nothing much
so
at all.
How can locking them up be the solution?
Well, it's not supposed to be the solution. It's supposed to be the deterrent, isn't it? It's supposed to be that they think, well, I don't want to be 18 when I go in, 23 when I come out, waste my, the best years of my life. I won't carry the knife. Isn't that the idea?
Yeah, but then you say to them they don't carry the knife, and then what happens to the factors that have caused them to believe that they have to walk around armed with these knives? It's just like all this fury around, the rioting that happened in the summer. And now when people start to look at the convictions, most of those people, or a large percentage of those people, didn't have criminal records. They were just caught up in that pack mentality. But if you don't allow for that, and if you don't allow for people to be rehabilitated, then you might as well just lock everybody up. Why not lock the people up for speeding, or the people who are robbing us left, right and centre, the bankers? Why don't everybody just get locked up? Because if it's custodial and not rehabilitative, then there's no point. And I think, I didn't hear what Barry Mizzen said, but I believe that's the answer he was making. Most of us who are mature and sober enough and sane enough know that the best way to change someone's mindset is to give them alternatives. Because generally, if you show people that there are conscious choices that they can make, and if you do this, these are the consequences. However, if you do that, you're more likely to have this kind of lifestyle, and change people's social trajectories in that way, it'll be more beneficial.
And somehow or other, all the teachers whose classes they've sat in at school, from reception class all the way through, they haven't managed to make any kind of impression. And all the head teachers whose assemblies they've sat in from the age of 5, they haven't made any impression. And people at church and grandmas and grandpas. I mean, I know you didn't, but I'm saying it. I'm saying if you have to teach them from a standing start, it's an enormous task, isn't it?
I don't think that's what the point is. And the reason why I even spoke about the riot thing, if you look at your own life and you're honest enough, how many times did you make a mistake, or how many times did you do something, you went against your good judgment and you either got caught up in the moment or the hype or whatever? How many times did you do that?
Are you asking me?
How many times? I'm asking.
Hardly ever. I was brought up with all sorts of respectable middle-class values. I did as I was told. And even that didn't work all that well, William. It hasn't been great. And I've hardly ever done anything that I shouldn't have done.
So what I'm saying is,
unfortunately,
hardly ever is the point that I'm making. What I'm saying is, if we can have effective programs that reinforce what these young people are being told in schools, in the home, or wherever, that's how we make that critical change. But if all we ever do is come out with these mealy-mouthed policies, when I get in, we're going to do this. Look, come on. We know people say anything to win elections, and they always renege on those things. So let's pretend that we're not living in that political world, and let's just jump into the real world and say, did we actually expect these government people to do that? I didn't, which for me, the people like myself or the school teachers or whoever, all those people that you mentioned, the ones who are trying to create that effective change should maybe be given a bit of room and a bit of backing to do so. Otherwise, we'll be having this conversation again in 10 years' time. Absolutely. Guaranteed.
Dr. Henry, thanks very much indeed for joining us. So the story is that 80% of knife thugs are not sent to jail, but you heard Barry Mizzen, the father of murdered teenager Jimmy Mizzen, and also there Dr. William Henry, both saying, yeah, but you can't keep locking kids up. It's not the solution. It's not the answer. We don't need tougher jail sentences. We don't need mandatory 5 years in jail for carrying a knife. That won't work. We need education. That's what we need. Education. I said, what about the years of education that these kids are supposed to have already had? Doesn't seem to have made any difference. What exactly will you educate them to do or not to do? It sounds like the most enormous task. Educate kids who would carry knives to see themselves in a different way, to have such certain kind of self-respect, to have a kind of confidence, to esteem education, to think about their possibilities and their potential. I mean, it's an enormous thing. It sounds like effectively changing their entire personalities, all they've ever thought before, all they'll think in the future, turning lives around almost from a standing start. How on earth does anybody ever achieve anything so hugely ambitious as that? So we're talking about that. 0207.